Welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks so much for joining with us. 2 months after the massacre on October 7th, Israeli Defense Forces are making major progress in their mission to destroy Hamas. Over the past day, they struck 450 targets. They also captured hundreds of suspected terrorists.
Friction is building between the United States and Israel over the increasing number of Palestinian civilian casualties. Paul Strand brings us the story from Jerusalem.
Fighters of the IDF and the Shin Bet arrested and interrogated hundreds suspected of involvement in terror activities. Over the past day, many also surrendered. The intelligence we are gathering during the interrogations serves us during the continuation of the fighting.
The intelligence gathered may well help the IDF know more about the 138 hostages still inside Gaza. The IDF also announced they killed 2 high-ranking Hamas intelligence terrorists. It also announced Hamas is reportedly firing rockets out of safe zones. The IDF also included Khan Yunis, the second largest city in Gaza, as part of its evacuation zones. Amid the intense fighting, U.S. President Joe Biden called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Jordan's King Abdullah to increase humanitarian assistance to the civilians in Gaza. He emphasized the critical need to protect civilians, provide corridors to safe zones, and separate them from Hamas. In talking to reporters after meeting with United Kingdom Foreign Secretary David Cameron, the U.S. Secretary of State gave his strongest public criticism yet of Israel's military operation in South Gaza. With Reuters reporting he said there was a gap between Israel's intention of protecting civilians and the number of casualties. But the Israeli Defense Forces report that Hamas is launching rockets from inside humanitarian zones that have been established to give civilians a safe refuge. And another challenge for Israel is that Hamas uses its own people as human shields. Israel says it's supplying aid and provided Gazans with maps to get away from the fighting. Still, Israel says it's working to increase the number of aid trucks going into Gaza. Beyond Gaza, more attacks. Early Friday morning, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad was hit by a rocket attack, the first attack since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war. There were no casualties. And Prime Minister Netanyahu warned Hezbollah that if it started an all-out war, Israel would turn Beirut and South Lebanon into Gaza, while encouraging Israeli forces.
We are determined to bring victory, and we will do it with your help.
But for now, the focus remains on Israel's assault on Hamas in Gaza, with international pressure growing for Israel to finish the job. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
In my opinion, the pressure should be put on Hamas, not on Israel. If Hamas is really concerned about the citizens of Gaza, about the children of Gaza, well, then number one, they need to stop firing rockets. That is an absolute. If you're going to continue to attack Israel, you can't then blame Israel for responding to those attacks. The second thing they should do, they should unconditionally surrender, give themselves up for the sake of the children of Gaza. That is where the pressure should come, and that's where the international pressure should come. They're quite clearly guilty of crimes, war crimes, and what they did on October 7th, and they need to be held accountable. Well, Dr. Ophir Falk is a foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, joins us now for more from Tel Aviv. So let's talk about this growing international pressure on Israel. The Biden administration and the United Nations are now putting pressure to limit civilian casualties, but all at the same time, Hamas seems to be placing them in harm's way. What can Israel do about the situation?
Well, thank you for having me. Of course, Israel seeks to minimize civilian casualties. That's our strategy. That's our counterterrorism strategy for over 75 years. We seek to minimize civilian casualties, not only because it's the right thing to do, because it's the effective thing to do. On the other hand, Hamas seeks to maximize civilian casualties, not only because it's a sick, genocidal terrorist organization, but because they see that as an effective propaganda tool into coercing Israel to stop the war, to get a ceasefire, and to go for another war after they regroup. That's not going to happen. Prime Minister Netanyahu's war cabinet defined the mission of this war. It directed the IDF to destroy Hamas, so that they will never be able to attack Israel or anybody else ever again, and to free our hostages. That is exactly what the IDF is doing as we speak right now, destroying Hamas, and we're doing everything we can to free the hostages.
Well, let's turn to the UN. The Secretary General has invoked a rarely used resolution calling for a ceasefire. And Israel's foreign minister has now accused the Secretary of anti-Semitism. What's your prediction of what's going to happen at the UN?
Well, Israel is actually quite accustomed to the General Secretary's double standards that he sets for Israel. But in reality, Israel has set the standard for minimizing civilian casualties. The ratio of unintended deaths as to terrorist deaths is the lowest the lowest actually, I think, in modern military history. And the IDF sets the standard in that respect. The UN would be very helpful if they fulfill their charter and help with humanitarian aid. It's already been more than 60 days, and they haven't been able to erect very many tents in the safer zones that we have established for the civilians, for the civilian population. That we have urged them to get out of harm's way. We've given them prior notice. There aren't very many, if any, militaries on Earth that would give notice before they attack. And then we've given notice to all of the civilian population in Gaza to get out of harm's way and into safer zones. We would appreciate if the UN would and the UNRWA people fill up to their duty and to help civilians.
Let's talk about duty. Red Cross has been criticized by Israel for not attending to the hostages. It's like in the recent days, it just seems to be ignored that there are Israeli hostages in the hands of Hamas. What's your message to the Red Cross?
Well, my message to the Red Cross, and actually to anybody, any country and any person of moral standing, to demand the immediate and unconditional release of all the hostages immediately. These Hamas savages attacked Israel on October 7th, murdering over 1,000 men, women, and children, beheading children, burning babies alive, raping women over and over again before murdering them, and taking over 200 civilians hostage. Those hostages should be released immediately, unconditionally. The Red Cross should visit the hostages at the very minimal. That is their duty. It's actually part of the agreement that was reached between the sides, and that pending obligation should be abided by.
Well, let's talk about a tactic. It's been reported that Israel is planning to flood the tunnels in Gaza. Is the IDF going to go ahead with that plan? And if so, what about those hostages? Could they be in harm's way?
Well, clearly, I can't get into any operational details of what the IDF will or will not do. What I can tell you is that the IDF will destroy Hamas. The IDF is destroying Hamas as we speak right now. The IDF will also do everything possible to free the hostages. Those two missions are not mutually exclusive. We've already been able to free 110 hostages. If you would have talked to me 2 months ago, or to anybody 2 months ago, I don't think anybody, or very few people, would have told you that 110 freed hostages would be was something possible. Thankfully, thank God, we've been able to free 110 hostages, and that has been the result of IDF pressure, and more pressure will be put on Hamas to free the hostages. And we also appreciate the assistance given by the United States in that manner as well. That the President of the United States actually personally intervened in the hostage negotiations and has assisted in that matter.
Well, we certainly stand with you, and we'll continue to stand with you until Hamas is absolutely destroyed. It should no longer exist, and whatever measures need to be taken to ensure that for the long-term peace and security, not just of Israel, but of the entire region. We applaud you, and please continue on until that goal is achieved. Dr. Falk, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for the great support. Thank you, guys. Thank you.